So that would, kind of be the bankster syndicate. And but I've also, there's a whole chapter in my book on funding. You mentioned funding. I think over the years there's been multiple sources of funding. Uh, the military, there's been taxpayer-funded stuff. There's been, there's two ways that taxpayers can fund it through the military. There's the overt military budget, but in the overt military budget, they have lots of code words and camouflage. They can hide a lot of the funding for it, and so they can go through that way. And then there's also the black military budget, which really exploded around 1980. And in the book, I make the case for right around 1980 being the beginning of the construction, or the production of the, what I call the proprietary chemtrail fleet, which would probably be the single most expensive aspect of this whole thing. Developing a fleet of at the time, when they started, probably scores of proprietary aircraft, completely dedicated to spraying chemtrails and absolutely loaded with all types of super high technology, secret technologies and things. I believe that the deep state, in other words, the CIA, which I make a case in the book that the CIA has been at the center of bringing forward this whole project ever since their inception in 1947. The CIA has had lots of money available for funding this through their global narcotics racket. I make a case for that. I mean, we saw the CIA funding Operation Gladio and it was the late 40s, I believe, on through the 50s and on into the 60s. And so, they have been using the profits from their drug trade to perform these crimes against humanity. And so they may be funding it that way as well. There's some other sources of fund. Oh yeah, there's money that's just missing. What's her name?
Catherine Austin Fitts.
Austin Fitts has been documenting the trillions and trillions of dollars. It just, all of a sudden, I mean, they just don't know where it went anymore, And there was a story that came out just actually a few months ago. It was really only covered by the mainstream media and Bloomberg, where it was the biggest amount of money missing ever. It was like, I think, $30 trillion or something like that. And, it was just one mainstream media news article, and, oh, we lost $30 trillion, the Pentagon said, and, oh, that's kind of swept under the rug. I mean, most people didn't even hear about this. I mean, that type of money, those kinds of amounts of money could, propel the entire project throughout the decades. So there's plenty of ways that this whole thing could have been funded over the years.
Well, absolutely. And one of the things I've been saying lately, Peter, is that it sort of feels like the globalist cabal, the Rothschilds. Look, I made a video not that long ago called Rothschilds, Trillions, Quantified, I think is what I called it. And just based on the data of the wealth that they had by their own admission 200 years ago, and just based on the wealth of just one family member, in simple compound interest at 7 or 8%, the wealth grew to over 200 trillion. Okay, conservatively speaking, we have to remember these people own the printing presses all over the world. They own the central banks. They manipulate markets. So obviously, they've made a lot more than 7 or 8% interest on their money. So here's my point. Sometimes when we hear about the trillions being looted from our own government, it feels like they're calling in the debt. Right? It feels like if we the people are collateral on this funny money, on the debt, they're calling in the debt, and we the people are the collateral.